Hello and welcome to Projector, and on this episode I finally get around to reviewing Idris Elba on the hunt for terrorists in Paris in Bastille Day. Michael Mason, played by Richard Madden, is a pickpocket and scam artist in Paris who makes the mistake of stealing the bag of Charlotte Le Bon's Zoe, unaware that it contains a bomb. Now he's a wanted man, and he's soon pursued and apprehended by CIA agent Sean Breyer, played by Idris Elba, who has been sent to investigate. Realising that Michael was in the wrong place at the wrong time, Sean offers him the chance to clear his name by helping him find the people really responsible, and discovers the bombing is only the start of the conspiracy leading up to Bastille Day. Bastille Day was originally announced a couple of years ago, and it's very much been an off and on project. It was originally announced with Ben Affleck in the lead role, and it was going to be helmed by Morten Tyldum of Headhunters fame, who would make his English language debut. But that wasn't to be. When Argo became a success, Affleck dropped out, and so did Tyldum at the same time, and Tyldum instead opted to do The Imitation Game, which became this Oscar-nominated movie. And as for Ben Affleck, well, we all know what he decides to do instead. But after a few false starts, they finally managed to get it in front of the camera with a new director, James Watkins, and a new star, Idris Elba. But despite this, it does feel like the version of Bastille Day that actually made it to the screen is a lot smaller scale than the one that we probably would have got a couple of years ago. And you can tell, especially towards the climax of the film, which are meant to be set in these big full-scale riots, which would normally involve lots of extras, but here it seems like a small gathering of people that are kettled into these very tight sets that are very carefully shot, not to give away the fact that they only had a handful of people at that particular time. And to be honest, it does feel like, despite the fact that this is an attempt at a local blockbuster action movie, it feels like it's faded away very quickly, which is not actually surprising because it's not entirely remarkable. Idris Elba's been having a really good year. He's appeared in not one, but 2 Disney movies, and he was fantastic in The Jungle Book, and we're going to see him later this summer in Star Trek Beyond. And this gives him a lead role in an action movie, which is quite exciting. Unfortunately, it doesn't really use him to the best of his abilities. See, the thing with this role is that it's so generic and so nondescript that it does feel like the original script of this movie could have been insert action star here. You could have put anyone in this role and it probably would have been identical. It feels like the kind of thing that Jason Statham might have made a couple of years ago, and at least with Statham being in it, you'd have the possibility of some oddball humour that might give it a little bit of character. Well, at least you hope in a Statham movie anyway. Here, Elba plays the role very straight, very by the book, and unfortunately what he's playing is what you could describe in a trailer voiceover as a renegade who doesn't play by the rules. He's this very unorthodox CIA man determined to track down these bombers and find them. So he has no real character. He's just this very gruff, very stiff guy, and yeah, he's tough and imposing, but that's not really enough for me. And it's a shame because Elba's a charisma machine, but he doesn't do anything with this role. It just seems like he's just going through the motions. And the other problem that Elba has in this movie is that it feels like he's playing second fiddle to Richard Madden. It doesn't feel like this is an Idris Elba movie at points. It feels like Richard Madden's movie. There are whole stretches of this film where Madden's character takes up the focus and Elba is in the background, especially in the opening 20 minutes. That becomes an issue because I didn't like Madden's character, because he's this con man hustler, but there's no charm to him because he seems like this relentless opportunist who is always looking out for himself and will gladly screw other people over if it suits his own interests, if it serves him to do that. His character is so kind of noxious and unpleasant that you don't really feel sorry for him. Despite it being a buddy cop movie essentially, it doesn't feel like there's a whole lot of interaction between Elba and Madden. It doesn't feel like there's much chemistry between them because Elba is so rigid and standoffish that most of their interactions involve Madden sheepishly asking a question and Elba just glowers him down. And that's amusing on a couple of occasions, but it doesn't entirely work. There's a scene, for example, where they're in an interrogation room and Elba frees him so he can demonstrate his pickpocketing technique. And that moment is amusing, but far too often it's exchanges like, "Can I get a gun?" That could have come out of a dozen action movies, and that's also the issue with this script. It feels like it's a dozen different action movies that you've kind of seen before. And to director James Watkins' credit, he's very much going for this stripped down approach. He's very much taken stock of, say, the Bourne movies and really tried to recapture that on a smaller scale. In fact, with its Paris setting, what it actually reminded me of is one of those movies that Luc Besson's Europa Corp makes. It definitely has that sort of vibe of Taken about it. And despite not being an action movie director, Watkins has previously specialised in horror. He did Eden Lake, which is a fantastically intense survival horror movie, and I really liked that. But I wasn't hugely enamoured with his fault, The Woman in Black. Here he manages to convert his style to action very well, and what he does is that he keeps it moving, and that's probably the best thing you can do in a former action movie like this, is to just keep it moving. This is very much 90 minutes in and out. And I do mean in and out. This movie does not stop for a moment. And it's always got that energy up. When it comes to shooting the action sequences, Watkins isn't bad at it. He may be going for this very fast-paced effort, but in the action scenes, he shoots them very clean, very clear, with very distinct shots, so you know what's going on a lot of the time. There's only a couple of occasions here where it does feel like the pacing has interfered with the fight scenes, so that they do seem to end quite quickly, so that you don't quite register what has happened immediately. But there are sequences in this movie that are very well executed. There's a rooftop chase, for example, that is quite well done. But the highlight of the film is this fight in the back of a van, and that is really, really invigorating. That is the high point of the movie, because it's this very claustrophobic sort of battle royale all going in the back of this moving van. It's genuinely quite thrilling. The story here, however, is very basic. You've seen many action films like this, you're going to see a lot more action movies like this, and it's got a lot of cliches and tropes that you've seen in all kinds of movies. And there's nothing about the way it's directed or written or how the characters act that distracts you from just how kind of workmanlike this is, with the exception of the reveal halfway through. The twist regarding the identity of the villains and their motives I thought was quite well done, even if it does borrow from a certain action classic. I thought that did add a little bit to the story, but not enough to make it seem distinctive from a number of other entries in the genre. One thing that's unavoidable, however, is the movie's unfortunate sense of timeless. When they shot Bastille Day all the way back in November of 2014, no one could have possibly imagined the year that Paris would have afterwards, where it had not one but 2 terrorist attacks. And as you're watching Bastille Day, there is something a little bit uneasy about it, because there are distinct parallels, and your mind does cast back to those terrible days, unfortunately, in this otherwise fairly lightweight action movie, especially because there's a plot point regarding the villain's plan where they're trying to incite racial hatred in order to stoke up this riot in the run-up to Bastille Day. Although, even then, I'm not sure this plot point can be taken entirely seriously, especially when you've got subtitled lines like, "The hashtags will tip it over." Oh yes, I'm not kidding. A rise is incited via the use of carefully controlled hashtags. One thing that did strike me as very curious is, despite the fact that this is a UK-French co-production, this is so clearly aimed at an American market. And you can tell because all the non-French actors have adopted American accents, despite the fact that most of the cast are British. So you've got a lot of dodgy accents about. So you've got Idris Elba with an American accent. Richard Madden is this American who's ran away to France, but probably the most egregious accent comes from Kelly Reilly, who is re-teaming with her Eden Lake director. Her performance in this film as the CIA boss, it's like someone said to her, do you know Jessica Chastain's performance in Zero Dark 30? You've got red hair. Could you try doing that exact same performance? It's an uncanny impression of Jessica Chastain. It's actually hilarious. I couldn't stop thinking about the fact that someone had clearly asked her to impersonate a performance in a wildly different movie from this one. But aside from these quirks and incidental details, there's little really to be said about Bastille Day. It is totally perfunctory. If you're a genre fan, this is perfectly watchable. You'll get an adrenaline fix out of it, I think. But at the same time, it's so unremarkable. It is completely disposable. You'll forget about it whilst you're watching it. And I have heard some people refer to this as being Idris Elba's audition tape for James Bond. See, the thing is, this movie is so nondescript that it's kind of a waste of his talents. He's shown himself to be a fantastic dramatic actor, and this role requires none of that, to be honest. The only real character or anything distinctive that Elba shows here is that he sings over the closing credits. I mean, he does have that in his favour. He's a James Bond who can belt out his own theme song. A solid nuts and bolts action thriller, Bastille Day is workmanlike, with horror director James Watkins keeping things quick and punchy, but it feels too plain to be anything more. Idris Elba is hugely watchable, but his character is such a generic rule-breaking hero there's little he can do to liven it up, with not enough in the way of buddy cop interaction with Richard Madden, who's rather sleazy con artist you don't entirely find yourself rooting for. There are a few well-orchestrated set pieces, and aside from the unfortunate real-life parallels the film accidentally bumps into, it's a perfectly serviceable genre movie, but there's little particularly memorable about it, and Elba deserves better than fronting stock actioners. Coming up soon, Emilia Clarke cares for Sam Claflin in the adaptation of Me Before You. We witness the beginning of Warcraft, and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are back. But until then, I'm Matthew Buck, fading out. Follow me into the jungle.